Okay, so guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Inoue versus Kim fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So, like I've kind of been in the past saying, Inoue, in my opinion, is pound for pound number one, number two fighter. I'm sure many people would say that he's definitely in their top three. And he's back, he's fighting, not against the opponents in which anybody expected at all. Everybody was expecting, of course, Sam Goodman, but I'll speak a bit more about that in just a moment. Just in general, it's great to see Inoue back fighting. He is one of my favourite, if not my favourite, fighter currently at the moment. And so, yeah, in general, I'm very just excited to see him back fighting. And, of course, anybody he's fighting against, I'm going to tune in for, and I'm going to be here to do a prediction to talk about him. And, to give the base overview, Inoue is 28-0 with 25 KOs, and Kim is 21-2 with 13 KOs. This fight is for the IBF, WBC, WBO, and WBA World Super Bantamweight titles. Inoue's last fight was a win via TKO in round 7 versus Doheny, and Kim's last fight was a win via TKO in round 6 versus Loh Shab. This is in Inoue's home country of Japan. Kim's losses have come versus Diesel in 2023 and No in 2012. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, all the belts are on the line. Of course, Inoue undisputed champion, and like I say, this is perhaps not what anybody expected, and I don't think Inoue would have expected it. This isn't in his plans when he first moved up into the super bantamweight division. It was kind of set out that he would fight Tapales, then he would fight maybe a Casemiro, then possibly, one more, and then he'd move on. Now, it's seemingly like he's going to be around for perhaps a little bit longer than everybody's expecting in the super bantamweight division. He's had the fight versus Tapales, he's had the fight versus, of course, TJ Doheny, he's, also had the fight versus Fulton Jr. as well, of course, which was before that, and he's now going on to this fight with Kim, and it's definitely not what was expected. Like I mentioned, the Goodman fight was the fight that was meant to happen. It was the fight in which everybody was wanting and kind of expecting. I know he also fought Neri as well. Another top contender, and so he's really been going through all the top contenders and pretty much beating everybody who's really stood in the division for quite a while and had a bit of a run in the division, of course, bar one, which I'll mention in a moment. But Goodman really earned his and had to work hard to earn his shot to be able to get in line for Inoue. And, he had to wait his turn a bit and had to really kind of, like I say, work hard to get out of that kind of Australian boxing shadow and just get into the actual world level limelight. But it seemingly happened, and then of course the fight was arranged to happen. A lot of people, of course, like pretty much anybody, would be written off against Inoue at the moment. He was written off Goodman, and he was really of keen to make things right, I suppose, and try and cause the upset. And obviously he hasn't been given that opportunity, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing Goodman in the past, so I know that it's most definitely had a big impact on him, and I'm sure he's devastated because he hasn't been able to fight, and it's out of no real fault of his own. You can, and I've seen a few people saying that Goodman perhaps shouldn't have been sparring as much on the eye because it was a reoccurring eye cut injury. Perhaps he should, like I say, shouldn't have been sparring so hard, or you know, not training as hard in general. But it's very difficult to say that when you are fighting against somebody like an Inoue. Inoue is arguably the best fighter in the world at the moment, and so you can't say to someone who's going into fight possibly the best fighter in the world that they shouldn't be training as hard. Due to the possibility of getting an eye, like a slight, an eye injury, which has been reoccurring, of course. So it's very unfortunate. Will he get given one more chance? To be honest, I highly doubt it. I think that Inoue perhaps might go on to actually fight if he beats Kim Akhmadaliev, and it wouldn't surprise me if he actually does go on to fight Akhmadaliev next, because there, of course, has been a lot of a build-up, and perhaps people saying that Akhmadaliev has been ducked by Inoue. The IBF ordered it, and the IBF have been very keen and very quick to strip a lot of fighters in recent times. You know, Canelo being one of them, and Usyk being another one. Some great fighters. He's been very quick to strip them just because they're not fighting their mandatories, and Akhmadaliev has been the IBF mandatory. He's also been, of course, a WBA interim as well. And then he's not been, he's filed a complaint as well to say that he got ordered to fight, I believe, in Inoue back in June, July time, and that didn't happen. So there's been a lot of frustration, I'm sure, from that end. And I mean, Akhmadaliev is still coming off an excellent victory himself versus Espinosa, and so it actually wouldn't surprise me if that fight is next. Now that Inoue is seemingly getting involved with Riyadh season, he's got all his fights, sponsored by him, and he's a partner with them. It wouldn't surprise me if his next fight is outside of Japan and it's with possibly His Excellency getting involved, and it possibly would be with Akhmadaliev. It would make sense. I don't believe that Akhmadaliev sees any care in any other fight at the moment. I think he's very happy in the position in which he is in the rankings, so he's either going to have to wait for Inoue to go up to featherweight, which we're all expecting will happen at some point when the timeline's kind of gone a bit squiff now, and so we're not really too sure. There's still talks of him being on a show in May, April time, and then with Nakatani also on the undercard, and then Inoue and Nakatani possibly fighting at the end of the year. So there's a lot of different things. It's not quite as set out as what it once was for Inoue, and so we're not even too sure what's happening, if he is going to move into the featherweight division or not. But for now, if he doesn't, and perhaps he is waiting for that other fight versus Nakatani, perhaps the Akhmadaliev fight could be an excellent fight. I don't believe that he is ducking him. Eddie Hearn, of course, is going to say different because it's his fighter, and he's going to do everything for his fighters, which I respect completely as a promoter. But in my opinion, I don't think he is. It just actually might happen next. I think if he is, of course, able to beat Kim, and I think he is, like I say, pound for pound number one. Everybody wants to fight him, even if it's and everybody wants to watch him as well, even if it is against somebody like a Kim. He's been so disciplined, so well trained. I feel like the days in which boxers can get away with becoming a world champion and then going out and partying and really kind of just doing what you want, the likes of what Oscar De La Hoya did and fighters like that. I think that time is gone, and I think fighters have to be so disciplined to be able to really stay at the top level for a prolonged period of time. I mean, you see with Usyk as well, he doesn't seem to really blow up in weight. He seems to be able to be so drilled, so focused all of the time, and Inoue seems to always be in that 100% excellent state in which, he has that shredded build, of course, all the time, and I just don't kind of see any kind of lack of discipline in his training, and so that's just credit to him. I don't think, perhaps he can overlook opponents, and I think perhaps he has overlooked opponents in the past. Of course, he got dropped versus Neri. He was maybe having a bit too much fun in there and trying to make it more of an entertaining thing. Of course, he is a showman at the same time, which of course is going to build the huge fan base he has out in Japan, but I think he has been shown that he might overlook in the past. With this fight, he might also be more frustrated because of the fact he's had to wait around for Goodman, and because that this isn't the fight that he's wanted to fight, and because people are saying that he's ducking at Medaliev, he might be more frustrated with this fight. So he might be really wanting to go out there and just get an early stoppage and get him out, and then perhaps trying to force the fight. I'm not too sure. We will have to wait and see. But there's just different factors that could play into this. He has so much pressure on him, so much expectation on him, which of course he has with every fight. But this perhaps even more so because Kim is coming in on such short notice. On that, perhaps I believe it's like 2 weeks' notice, if that. So, Kim is definitely going to be somebody who I think could cause slight issues to that of Inoue. Can definitely make it difficult. He's not going to be just walked over, in my opinion. It's interesting to see how it is an all-Asian contest between Inoue and Kim. Inoue has had all-Asian contests at the highest levels. A lot of the time, them fighters are from the Philippines. We had Tapales from the Philippines, we had Daener from the Philippines. There's a lot of, great Filipino lower weight division fighters that have been and that are still around at the moment. But from South Korea, there are very few. You kind of, on the top of my head, I've not been able to really think of any that have really been able to reach that higher levels from South Korea in the professional rankings. I even went on Google to try and do some research. You look back to the 90s, really, maybe early 2000s, to really be able to find much from South Korean fighters being able to have a lot of success in the sport. So Kim has probably had a lack of opportunity, and that's through no real fault of his own. And I think it's just unfortunate, to be completely honest. Obviously, he's had to just stay ready, and it's full credit to him. Any fighter who is able to just stay ready and wait for their moment and strike whenever the moment becomes available to them, say yes to whenever the opportunity is there, you have to give him credit. And Kim did that. The announcement was very quick after the Goodman fight was, announced that it was cancelled. It was very quick. Within a couple of hours, I believe that Kim was announced as a fighter to replace him and to come in. So they must have, I don't know, had him on standby because of the first cancellation or what. But staying ready, saying yes to the opportunities. People were saying, why didn't Ahmed Ali have come in and just fight? Ahmed Ali probably wouldn't want to come in on 2 weeks' notice. He wouldn't have been probably ready, and he wouldn't have been staying ready like that. But that's full credit to Kim. I would like to hope that he, perhaps was still in training to quite a high level. I would hope that he's not just coming in off holiday before going into fight Inoue. But of course, we don't really know if that's the case or not. But for the lack of opportunities he's had to travel. This is his sixth country. He's fought in Japan a couple of times. He's fought in Korea. He's fought in Australia. I believe Mexico as well. America, I think. And so, very different, various different places, taking opportunities, fights which, perhaps have been tough fights and away fights, and been able to still collect up a very valiant record and have success against, not the highest level of opposition, but still opposition in which, are creditable to an extent. And he's got himself this world ranking. He's 11th in the WBO. It's nonetheless, like I say, a world ranking. It's not crazy high. It's not the heights in which is going to create much of a stir for him to have been in a position to really be a mandatory challenger or anything like that. So, of course, he's very fortunate to be in the position that he's in with this fight. But for the most part, like I say, it's just staying ready, and you got to give him credit for that. And in his career, like I mentioned, he's fought in various different countries. I feel like in general he's had a lack of opportunities. He started off with some really tough fights in his early career. I mean, he's been fighting since like 2012, 2011. Like I said, the loss was his second pro fight. It was an evenly matched fight. I believe it's against undefeated fighters. And to be honest, in Asia and South America, a lot of the time, you see early fights against, when fighters are early on in their career, they're going to get matched up against really hard fights. That's why you see a lot of the times Mexicans having losses early on their record, or Japanese fighters a lot of the time having losses early on their record. You can name somebody like Satsumi, who has a loss early on his record. He's a great world champion and did an amazing job when he beat Takuma Inoue, but he was just matched really early on against really tough opposition, and that's what happens. And when there are a lack of fighters from your country, from South Korea, it's only going to be inevitable that some tough fights are going to be early on. And, he suffered that loss early on. He has, like I say, had a bit of a stop-start type career. He's had years, 2 years gaps, a few 2 year breaks, like I say, fighting from 2012, 2011. But that's what, 13, 14 years professional now, and he has had them breaks in his career, possibly due to no fault of his own, possibly just due to lack of opportunities, maybe falling out of love with the sport a little bit because he's not getting these opportunities. And he obviously had that other loss in 2023. It was against an opponent in Diazao who isn't really the most skilled of opponents, perhaps didn't really have an excellent record, and you would have expected someone like Kim to be able to go through him. But to be fair, it was a very entertaining contest. It was a very close fight. It was a back and forth type fight. It was, a fight of the year type contender type fight. It was not a fight in which, Kim got stopped badly and he looked poor in it. It was just a very, slugfest type fight where they're both just absolutely giving their all, showing that warrior war type spirit, and that was Kim showing that he can deal with fighting on a deal with fighting in positions where he doesn't want to be in, and fighting a fight in which is a war type fight, and perhaps he might aim to take something like Inoue into a war type fight. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously, the whole card isn't anything really that special. Like I say, they're trying to get perhaps. Well, there was talk about Bob Arum saying that he wants to get Inoue and Nakatani on the same card. For the moment, Nakatani is having all these great shows, all these great cards, and then there's lots of world title fights underneath, and that's excellent to see. But Inoue is kind of a bit different. He's kind of headlining his shows, bringing this huge Japanese fan base in which he has. But the whole rest of the card is just not really got too much that interesting going on. It's lower level, title fights, and not really anything too big or too much to write home about. And so yeah, it's just interesting to see how Inoue still kind of has got his own path different to that of Nakatani, even though they are both with top rank, they're both huge fighters. Just like I said, they're both doing their own thing a bit differently. But Inoue, he's been doing that for a while now, so perhaps that's just the way that he likes it to be, the clear centre of attention when he's fighting out in Japan. And obviously, a lot of fans are wanting to see him back fighting outside of Japan, but we are waiting quite a while to see that happen. But for the moment, when he is just taking on challenges, then there's no real reason for him to leave Japan. If he is, that's where he's going to be comfortable, and that's where he's going to be selling the most tickets and making the most money. So for now, it does make sense. Obviously, to speak about them both as fighters, Inoue, there's not, it's I'm gonna miss certain things. What I'm saying basically, because he is such a good or a brilliant fighter that I'm not going to be able to list just how good everything is that he does, because like I say, he is one of the pound for pound best, number one or number two. In my opinion, I would probably have him second just because of what Usyk achieved last year, but before that I had him first. So top three, I'm sure everybody's going to agree with that. So I'm gonna, like I say, miss certain things, but as a fighter, some excellent things in which I pick up on. His accuracy, of course, is just sublime. Pretty much everything he's going to throw, he's going to land, and he's going to land clinically most of the time. He has typically a bit of an in and out type style most of the time. To be fair, versus Doheny, he didn't really use too much of an in and out type style. Perhaps that meant that he was getting caught with shots a little bit. I don't really think he respected Doheny too much as an opponent. I think he was just expecting to walk through him, and I think there was, a couple rounds in which Inoue was just stood there with his high guard, taking quite a few shots because he really didn't want to take too much of a backward step because he didn't feel like Doheny was going to be able to hurt him. But I think Doheny was scoring points in certain rounds because of Inoue doing that. And I believe if Doheny wouldn't have got the kind of strange injury in which he had, where Inoue managed to kind of punch into his stomach and then injure his back, which is something which nobody's ever really seen before, and it was kind of just Inoue was the only person to be able to do that. But if it would have gone a little bit longer to fight, I think Inoue perhaps might have started, not panicking, but just thinking, this isn't going the way that I wanted it to go. I can't just walk through this guy, and perhaps I'm a little bit uncomfortable here. So if Kim is able to stick around for a bit longer, then Inoue might, not question himself, but just think, this isn't where I want to be. And so, that's just something to take into consideration. He's of course very fast. He's very sharp. He makes adjustments excellently throughout the fight. Of course, you look back to the Neri fight. He was able to make excellent adjustments after he got knocked down and wasn't there waiting for any more shots anymore. He wasn't admiring his work anymore and really became a much more disciplined fighter after the knockdown. That definitely woke him up. Even against the Tapales fight, he made adjustments. Even in the Doheny fight, he made them adjustments as well. And in general, his team is excellent. His coach doesn't get anywhere near as much credit as what he deserves. And yeah, like I say, just able to make that adjustments, that fight IQ to really listen to your coach is just amazing. He controls the pace very well for the most part. He makes you question because of how good his feints are, because of how fast he is, because of just the dominance he has. a lot of the time when you're that dominant as a champion, fighters going into it are going to be questioning themselves. So it's not difficult to kind of, in general, break their mental spirit a bit. And you see Usyk do it a lot of the time against top world-class fighters. He can break their mental spirit and really make them question themselves because of how good they have been and the run that they're on. As soon as they get through a couple rounds, the fighters begin to question themselves if they aren't winning. And he's got that surprising power. You know, in general, he isn't the most biggest of fighters, and he's not somebody who's built like somebody who's immensely powerful, but he just has that surprising level of power in which always is able to just look destructive with pretty much everything he throws, and just the way that he turns into his punches is just sensational, really. He counters excellently, and I think he might be able to have a lot of success countering somebody like Kim. He can fight at a mid or an in close range. He can fight on the front or the back foot. He, like I say, feints very, very well. He will punch from pretty much every single angle in which he throws. He's got excellent shot variation. He's not greedy with his work. I don't believe that he's forcing the fight. I believe he's often, waiting, feinting, finding his moments, throwing his combinations with ease, to be completely honest. A lot of fighters can look quite robotic when they're throwing combinations or look uncomfortable planting their feet in the right moments, but Inoue always seems to do it really, really well. His timing, of course, is excellent. His body work is also excellent, and that, of course, was able to get in the win versus Doheny, what was able to cause Doheny so much problems. He sets off his jab excellently. He improves throughout the fight, which is a scary thing to have to deal with. Just a Inoue who starts off really well, but then just he has them gears, and he's gonna go through the gears, and he's gonna improve throughout the fight. His stamina is excellent. He makes fights seem like he's sparring. He seems like he's just throwing off them kind of light combinations sometimes where it's just like a sparring kind of combination where it doesn't look like you're trying to hurt the opponents, but it just is destructive. And he brings back his shots excellently as well. Sometimes, like I say, you can admire his work, but for the most part, he's bringing back his shots really well as well. Negatives about him, to an extent, negatives. I think if a fighter is too physical or is a bit more physical, I think he can perhaps find a little bits of problems in that. I don't think he's physically the most strongest of fighters, and I think Kim perhaps might be more physical. But is he going to be able to use that to the best of his ability? I'm not too sure. He, of course, like I say, might be too confident going into fights. Like I mentioned, trying to be too much of a showman. He can be caught early. He can be countered, and if he is countered, he will, like I say, perhaps stand his ground and not get pushed back perhaps as much as what he would be willing to have done in the past. He can stay in range, like I mentioned. I don't think his head movement is always excellent, and I think he can come in with his shots with his head on the line a bit, so he can get caught or clipped with his head on the line. His chin can be in the air a bit at times as well, and he, I think, can be slow to the body, and I think perhaps was getting slow to the body a little bit in that last fight versus Doheny. And he does throw from quite afar. He throws a lot of the time from quite low down as well, and his speed is able to match it, so it's not really predictable punching, but it does leave himself quite open if you can land a very perfectly timed shot from, just like I say, perfectly timed shot, and being able to just kind of find that little split second in which Inoue is just quite wide open when he is throwing some of his hooks. To speak about Kim as a fighter, he throws in bunches a lot of the time. He is a combination puncher. He has a good uppercut. He'll go to the body nicely. He'll go round to the body quite nicely with his hooks, and he works angles pretty well and is able to have success when he does that. He's a come forward fighter typically, but he can fight on the back foot at the same time. I don't think his footwork is anything too crazy, but he will aim to come forward throughout the most part of the fight. He goes to the body well, and like I say, I feel like that perhaps alongside his uppercuts are his best kind of two shots. He has had a lot of success not knocking guys out, and a lot of his knockouts in general have come from the bodywork in which he does offer, and he's got good timing at the same time as well. He plants his feet pretty well, so he might be able to perhaps damage Inoue a bit more than that of Doheny was able to, because he will perhaps plant his feet a bit better. He can find what works and then carry on going with it. Perhaps he is a little bit more limited in his arsenal. Like I say, his uppercut is nice, and the body shots in which he'll throw are nice as well. But, like I said, they're going around the bottom of the guard, then body shots, so Inoue will probably be aware of that, and the uppercut as well. Two shots, and like I say, he should be aware of, in my opinion. Inoue, he's typically quite an in-close type fighter, so if Inoue is to go back to that in-and-out type style, in which he quite often shows and is able to utilise, he definitely could have a lot of success, because I don't think Kim is anywhere near that as high a level at a mid-range. He wants to fight at a high tempo, like I mentioned. I feel like he is the more physical out of the two, and will probably try and push you back if he can. He won't back down, and he's shown that. It might sound a bit cliche to say, but he's shown that in his fights. Even in his loss, he wouldn't back down and carried on trying to keep going, and perhaps got a bit frustrated and let his ego get into it a little bit, but he showed that he wouldn't back down, and he's got solid stamina. He's able to go through the rounds pretty consistently as well. Negatives about him, I think he has the lesser reactions and the lesser speed than that of Inoue, which every fighter does, but I feel like it is a bit more considerably lesser than that of Inoue. His accuracy in close can sometimes be a bit poor. At the same time, if he does force the fight a bit, in my opinion, and if he is doing that, then I think his accuracy can be a little bit weak. He also throws from quite low down as well, and he, like I say, if he is coming forwards, he can get caught with counters quite a lot, and Inoue would definitely see that and make adjustments to be able to catch him with a shot if he is just throwing from low down, coming forwards, not really showing too much head movement, like I say, in general, dropping his guard. If he rushes in, I think he could definitely get caught with a sharp counter. He has the lesser movement out of the two and a bit more worse footwork than that of Inoue. He not doesn't really care too much about getting caught with counters in general. I don't think he cares too much. Like I say, he can fight off ego a bit. He can sit on the ropes a bit at the same time as well and try and push you off instead of actually moving off. And I think if he does that versus Inoue, it would be a very rough night for him if he's doing that. And I think he can struggle against fighters who are willing to go on the back foot but still have a strong high output at the same time. And like I say, he does take shots, and I feel like does get frustrated. Inoue is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Inoue is going to win via TKO in round 5. Like I mentioned, I feel like Kim is perhaps going to fight with a bit of frustration or a bit of a trying will to push him through, and he might show that physicality, but I think Inoue, even if he has to go onto the back foot, can definitely catch Kim with a counter. If Kim is sat on the ropes and like he has been in certain fights, Inoue, again, I think he's going to be able to land big clean shots and be able to get him out of there. I just don't really see too much of a way, bar making a physical fight going into the later rounds, that of Kim to have too much success. Maybe to the bodywork, you might be able to slow him down a little bit. Like I mentioned, I feel Doheny was perhaps able to do that a little bit at times, but I still inevitably believe that Inoue's skill level will be that much higher. It's just perhaps he might get hurt in the earlier rounds, Inoue, the earliest of rounds, if he is overlooking. But I feel like he's learning his lesson not to do that from the Neri fight. And so, like I say, a TKO in round 5 is my prediction for this fight. Then to go on, like I say, perhaps they'll give Goodman one more chance. We'll see. I feel like perhaps he could deserve it, but he has to be really sure that this eye injury isn't going to be something that's going to reoccur again. At Medaliev, of course, like I mentioned, it wouldn't surprise me if personally I believe that will happen next. He, of course, like I mentioned, is WBA interim. That could be a fight to keep him at a high level and to keep Inoue, you know, in the eyes of the public, still happy with him. And if he beats Akhmadaliev, then it's another huge win, and then he could perhaps go on to a Nakatani fight afterwards. We'll have to wait and see. If not, something like a Picasso hasn't really been talked about. He's WBC mandatory. He also fights with Top Rank, so that perhaps wouldn't be too much of a difficult fight to make, and might actually end up happening. But Picasso hasn't really been tested too much as of yet, so I don't know necessarily if it's too much. Well, it probably is a bit too much of a step up for him, in my opinion, or if this is his time now for him to actually move up to the heavyweight division. I think the kind of main champion in which people would be most interested in fighting would probably be Espinoza, and he's 6 inches taller, which will definitely be an interesting challenge to see how Inoue deals with a much taller fighter. I don't think he's really had to deal with a crazily, height difference, and that could definitely offer a big challenge. And Espinoza's been on a great run, was still able to stop Ramirez, even though it was a bit of a interesting stoppage. And of course, like I say, WBO champion. That could be the fight to happen. Of course, as that Lopez fight won't happen anymore with Liao now being champion. Liao was probably going to fight in Japan anyway. Perhaps he could fight Liao, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Inoue's career. I definitely think there are options available. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.